Okay, so welcome everyone to our final academic success workshop that we're doing in the fall term. My name is Thomas. I'm joined by Gretchen. We're both academic advisors at the First Year Center. We're very pleased to have you with us. Like I said, this workshop is going to be interactive. So I'm just going to move along here to our Menti instructions. Now, Menti is a website that you probably will have seen if you've done workshops with us in the past. It's going to give us an opportunity to do some questions, and some of those questions will be open response. Some of those questions will have multiple choice or scales or things like that. So I highly recommend that you join in on the Menti either on your phone through the QR code, or by visiting the website on the left-hand side and entering that code. Anytime as well, we ask a question on Menti, the link on the left-hand side will be up at the top. So if you're scrambling to get on Menti right now, don't worry, we'll have some opportunities to see the link a little bit later on.
Yeah, I just popped the link and the code into the chat as well. And thank you for all the people who are hitting that heart button. That's very helpful to us. It lets us know, okay, is everybody logged into the Menti? Should we be moving on to the next question? So yes, please, if you've managed to get on this page and get logged in, please hit that like button.
Totally. Yeah, so we'll just leave this one up here for another few seconds, and then we'll get right into the content of the workshop.
One thing I want to mention too with the Menti questions, especially the next one, the sort of first question that we're going to do, is that the answers are all anonymous. So other students won't be able to see, we're going to see everybody's answers all together. They're not tied to your specific email or name or anything like us. Even for us as presenters, we don't know who gave specific answers. So please feel free to, answer honestly, answer freely. We are really interested in getting your answers and hearing from you during those questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it looks like it's starting to slow down in terms of folks joining in on the Menti. So we'll move right along to our first Menti question.
Yes, this is kind of one of our open-ended questions, just a quick check-in to see how are you feeling about the last week of the term and about final exams. Okay, I see stressed showing up a lot already. Yeah, that's definitely one. Doomed. Oh no. Hopefully the things that you'll learn in this workshop will be helpful to help decrease some of that. So I'm seeing some students overwhelmed, nervous, a couple of more, I'd say positive ones, happy to be done, relieved it's almost over. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think all of those feelings are absolutely so relatable. Yeah. Shall we? Oh, I'll maybe wait and see if we have a couple answers.
Happy
Yeah,
for Christmas
happy for
break. Yeah,
Christmas
no
break.
kidding.
Definitely.
And another thing that folks you'll be seeing is you're feeling a lot of the same things that your classmates are feeling. A lot of folks are feeling stressed and doomed is one that's popping out to me right now. And nervous and things like that. So you're in the right place. We're hoping to give you some tools for your toolbox, so you can cope with some of those stressful feelings, the doom feelings, and have the best exam season that you can.
All right. So we have this note here that, so Thomas and I, as he mentioned, we are advisors in University One in the First Year Center. And one of the things we do besides, workshops like this is that we also work with students who during the exam period maybe have missed a final exam for, lots of different reasons. Very common one is medical, but it might be like other circumstances that pop up, and for some reason you miss an exam. If that happens to you, you can contact an advisor in your home faculty. So that might be University One, might be arts, might be science, and you can request a deferral. And a deferral or deferred exam is basically an opportunity to write that exam at a later date. There is a form that you have to fill out. It has to be approved by an advisor. That's why you have to come in and talk with an academic advisor. I'm going to put a link into the chat, or two links into the chat rather. One of them is more information about deferred exams, and another link is basically the contact info for academic advisors in any faculty. So it's good to know if you're not sure what your home faculty is, you can check on Aurora, see who you have to contact. But it is really important that if you miss an exam, it is usually, and it's during the exam period, it's your advisor in a home faculty you speak to. If it is, let's say this week, maybe you have an in-class exam, then it's your professor that you talk to. So just want to have that sort of that note there that yeah, if you miss an exam, it's okay. You don't have to just accept like an automatic F or fail in the course. There are opportunities to possibly write exams, oftentimes in early January.
Yeah, 100%. And I just wanted to mention as well, if you're feeling really ill during that exam and that's what's caused you to miss, you can always give a phone call to your home advising office. Don't feel that you need to bring yourself in very ill shape if that's the circumstance that you're facing. So just as long as the contact is made with an advisor within 48 hours, whether that be in person or in a phone call, that will be extremely helpful.
Just going to add one more link into the chat, which is now we've kind of changed things a little bit. So let's say, yeah, that example, you do get sick, you miss an exam. You don't necessarily need to like go to a walk-in clinic and get like a medical note. We have this new form, which I put a link to the PDF in the chat, called the self-declaration form for brief or temporary absence. And so you can check that out and you can use that in the same way that you would give like a medical note if you were sick. And same with like, other sort of those more compassionate personal circumstances that cause you to miss an exam. You can use this form as well to sort of support this, to say, yeah, I missed this exam for this reason. Here's my documentation. So just adding that in the chat there as well.
Yeah, thanks for doing that.
Should we look at our next question?
Yeah, so we're thinking a little bit about tutors. And many of you have learned about our tutoring services offered at the university or maybe outside of the university. We're wondering, have you accessed a tutor of really any kind this term?
Okay, I'm seeing we're getting a majority no, which is like, I'm sincerely interested because I wasn't sure what it would be like going in, seeing, but I'm glad to see that there's some folks who have access tutors this term. Okay.
Yeah, and the majority, it looks like, haven't, and of course that could be for a number of reasons. A lot of students, especially in their first year, are not aware that the university has tutors for a variety of different reasons, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a quick second. And for many students, visiting a tutor is not something that you need to do, and of course it's not a requirement. But it can be helpful for a lot of different circumstances. So if you found yourself or find yourself needing additional help with an academic tutor, just know that is available. And if you look on this slide here, we talk about the Academic Learning Center services and specifically their tutors. They have a few different tutoring types. So there's different types of tutoring that you might be accessing when you need some help. So probably what you think of when you think of a tutor is a content tutor. So you're doing your Chemistry 1100 course and you just can't wrap your head around a certain concept partway through the course. You might find yourself thinking, gee, I could really benefit from a tutor, and maybe someone who has a little bit more experience or expertise in this field would be able to help me understand this material and progress in the course. So that's kind of the main thing that we think of for content or for tutors. It's a content tutor, and that's available for over 90 U of M courses. So a lot of courses, particularly courses in the first year, there are academic tutors available. But academic tutors at the Academic Learning Center help with other things too. So study skills, maybe you want some feedback and some help with the way you're approaching your studying, your time management skills, your note-taking skills, your test-taking strategies, which we'll touch on a little bit later. They can also sit down with you and work with you on one of those things as well. And perhaps it's academic writing specifically that you've been having some struggles with, or you're looking for some feedback. Maybe you've even done pretty well with some of your academic writing, and you just want to take that next step and find even more room for improvement. That can be really helpful too. And in my experience, I've also accessed academic writing tutors during my time in university, and my co-facilitator today is a former academic learning center tutor who
Yeah.
just so happened to be the tutor that I worked with way back when. So so they're super helpful over there, and who knows, maybe you'll be co-workers with a tutor one day.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Oh, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so now we're going to get into what I think of as like the real meat kind of core content, and we're going to talk specifically about study strategies that maybe you're already using, even if you don't know that this is the specific language or terms that's used to describe them. Maybe this will be an introduction to some new strategies that I'd definitely recommend checking out. The way we like came upon why talk about these study strategies out of any of the dozens of ones that you could pick from. So much of the research about how we actually learn and study best and perform on tests and exams, it really consistently comes up with these three very powerful strategies. So the first one we're going to talk about is practice testing, which comes in a lot of different forms. The second is distributed practice, which basically means instead of cramming, instead of spending, like a whole 2 days, 3 days focused on one subject, maybe staying up really late, spreading out your studying into smaller chunks that you repeat over the long term, and interleaving. So instead of studying just one subject continuously, having some variety in your studying so that you're switching from different subjects or different topics. And you'll see the way that we're going to talk about them. We're going to really talk about we'll talk about each one separately, but they really are very complementary and meant to go well together. Okay. Yeah, can we go to the practice testing slide? Thank you. So yeah, there are lots of different forms that practice testing can take. I think one of the most obvious ones maybe that we think of is if you can get your hands on some old tests and exams, whether that's from your professor, whether that's from a student group like the Science Student Association. Writing old tests and exams just gives you such a good idea of what content do you know and don't know, what is the format, like how are certain questions asked, and what is the depth, like how detailed of information do you need to know. There is so much interesting research about how practice testing is really the most effective study strategy that you can use, much more effective than what I would call more passive things, like just rereading your material or notes, just rewriting notes, or rewatching lectures. And one of the reasons this strategy is so powerful because you're going to be assessed on your test taking skills. So you want your studying to match up as well as you can with how you're actually going to be tested and assessed. So example I think of is like on an exam, you're never going to be tested on how well you're rereading notes or rewatching something. You're going to be tested on how can you recall or retrieve that information that you've learned before. Other forms of practice testing include solving textbook problems. My advice for this is try to solve them without looking at the answers in the book first, because again, that is much more like a test environment where you don't know the answer. If you're writing essay exams and writing under that time pressure is maybe causing some anxiety, nervousness, try practicing, in a time situation so that you have some experience in actually writing in that under that time pressure, so that hopefully by the time that you do write the exam, that is a familiar experience of writing under a clock. If you're lucky, you might have had your instructor already provide like practice quizzes. Flashcards can be very useful for certain time certain types of courses, like ones with a lot of vocabulary, a lot of memorization. I'm thinking of language courses like, Japanese, Korean, German, and turning headings in your textbooks, in notes, to make questions is really powerful as well. Even just the simple act of taking some content, turning it into a practice question, can really help with the studying, because you're putting yourself now in sort of the mind of your professor, thinking, okay, if I was a professor, what would I want to see that someone has learned from this question? How would I test them? And so a lot of the practices associated with practice testing overall are just helpful for very active learning that's going to prepare you to actually write that exam, and that is going to help that information stick in the long term, because we just tend to remember information better if we've been tested on it rather than if we've just reread or rewatched content. Sorry, I think I kind of jumped the gun a little bit talking about at this point, but I'll let like if you can give us some examples of this, Thomas.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that this is something that isn't what we normally consider right away. I think when we're preparing for our exams, we feel that, well, as long as I've really mastered the content, that's everything that I'll need to know. And that's partly true. I think the content of the courses is, of course, the most important part. But another big part is the actual style of test taking, the actual style of the exam. So you might know the course content really well. Let's say you're doing a biology course, but if you really struggle with the format of multiple choice exams, then you might still struggle with the final exam, especially if you're new to a multiple choice exam. So kind of just building off of what Gretchen was saying, if you know that you're going to be doing a multiple choice exam, and you have some practice quizzes available to you, or even an old midterm available to you, that'll be extremely valuable for you to practice, not just for the content, but for the style of exam that you're going to be writing. And you can even, like Gretchen mentioned, add a time pressure, since the final exam will have a time associated with it. So you can sort of emulate the actual exam experience as best as possible during your exam preparation, because, well, of course, like Gretchen said, you're not going to be tested on how well did you read the notes. You're going to be tested on how well can you answer a series of multiple choice questions per se. And a similar thing can be applied to more writing courses. So I know a lot of students struggle with preparing for a writing-based course. Well, you can do a timed practice essay or a practice paragraph based off of old sample questions that you may have received earlier in the year, to not only help you rehearse some of the material in the course, but as well the actual format of writing an essay with a time limit.
Yeah, that's such a good point about the sample question. So in light of that, of thinking how important format is, we have this question about what type of exams are you writing? I believe that you should be able to choose multiple answers here. So this will be kind of interesting just to see the kind of spread. I think multiple choices is usually kind of a popular option. One thing Thomas and I were talking about when we were sort of looking at this workshop was, I love the way that he described. So Thomas did a degree in psych, how from his first year compared to his last year, he got so much better at the actual test taking strategies. He got better at doing multiple choice exams, not just mastering the content. And I love that. I thought that was such an interesting insight to have on how that's changed over the years.
Yeah, and to kind of build off that, I think a lot of it comes down to the experience of it as well. Even, as you get more experience in your university degree, and I know many folks here today are in their first year, as you're in your first term even, and moving into your second term, during the course, you can start to see which types of content are going to be important, and how that content might be formed into a multiple choice question. And I think for me, as I started improving and getting better at exams, a lot of it had to do with that recognition and recognizing small differences between different concepts and things like that. So it became just partly about the course content, which of course is where it starts, but as well as getting used to the exam format and becoming a better exam taker.
And to that end, I've put a couple more links into the chat. So yeah, I see multiple choice has won by a long shot, but short answer, long answer, problem solving are really high up there as well. I've just put links to a couple of different handouts from the Academic Learning Center. The first one is tips specifically on taking multiple choice exams. The second one is tips for writing essay exams. And the third one is about test and exam prep more generally. I think all three of them are really, really helpful in different ways. And the ALC has more and like similar handouts on test and exam prep and other academic topics on their website as well. Shall we talk about cramming and distributed practice?
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Let's
which you
go
sort of
there.
talked about it just a little bit before.
100%. So this one might be obvious. And if you've come to any of our other workshops, you've probably heard us say, don't cram, or we advise against cramming. And
We
all know
strongly advise against that.
strongly. And I know that many folks here will hear this message and try not to cram and then end up cramming anyways. And that's okay. That happens. But we will provide some alternative strategies, because we know cramming is really stressful, and it's probably not the most healthy thing to be doing for your body and your mind. And it can really make the exam season a lot more stressful. And I think for a lot of folks, this is where the stress comes from, is knowing that the exam period is going to involve days on days of hours on hours of studying and maybe not treating ourselves the most healthy way. And we want you to know that there are other ways to do it. Exam season will probably never be the most comfortable part of the year, but there are things that you can do to make it a little bit more manageable. And most importantly, a little bit more brain friendly. And there's kind of some alternative styles of managing our time that have been proven to support better memory retention, which is probably the most important part of exams, right? So with that said, we like to recommend that students use what we call distributed practice. And Gretchen touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is going to involve not just studying one subject for a long period of time. This is going to involve studying maybe more than one subject per day, and maybe cycling through those 3 or 4 subjects. So instead of saying, okay, well, I'm going to study for 5 hours in a row, I'm going to do anatomy, and I'm not going to get up until I'm done chapter 2 and 3 and 4 of anatomy. Well, that's a very daunting task. That's a lot of responsibility, and that's you're probably never going to get up and at that rate. And what we found is, and what a lot of researchers have found is that type of strategy or approach leads to a lot of procrastination. It leads to having a difficult time starting the work and really finding yourself distracted partway through. And that's why we recommend something like distributed practice, which kind of heeds off the idea that we're going to be studying more in smaller chunks of time, smaller bursts. So maybe I'll do half an hour of anatomy, and instead of trying to do 3 chapters of anatomy, my focus will be, okay, do the definitions of this first chapter, and then I'm going to do another subject, and then another subject, and then I'm coming back to anatomy and doing the next thing. So really you're spending a similar amount of time studying, but you're probably going to be a lot more efficient with your studying, fatigue a little bit less, and you're going to be taking care of yourself a lot more, because you'll be forcing yourself to take small manageable breaks throughout your studying day.
I want to jump in here to talk about the role of sleep and how it affects all of this. So a lot of the times, with cramming, people are very sleep deprived, which is probably one of the worst things you can do to your your body and your brain before you do something like very, very brain intensive, heavy cognitive load, like take a final exam. The way that we know memory works is that we learn something one day, we go to sleep, And over through the course of sleep, a lot of the most important information gets cemented, and some of the things that maybe are less important get kind of washed away by sleep. So you come back the next day, you've forgotten a little bit, and you have to go back and rehearse or repeat that information again. That is actually the ideal way to learn. You might have heard me say this before in other workshops. One thing I was thinking was a little bit of forgetting is a good thing because it forces you to actively recall and retrieve information again. The more repetition that you do spread out over the longer term, that those memories get stronger and stronger. And so that's why it can be helpful to think about slicing it up into these much smaller chunks, but over the long term. One of the ways that we were talking about it when we were looking at this was thinking of, okay, it's kind of like the difference if you've been at a Canadian Christmas dinner or a Canadian Thanksgiving dinner, kind of the difference in eating a huge dinner all in one sitting versus eating 3 balanced meals a day. There are ways that feel a lot better and that actually work a lot more naturally with how our bodies and our brains are actually do function well. Can we, I think this is relevant now. Can we go to the next Menti question?
We sure can.
Yeah, so on that note, just to see, and maybe this is going to be influenced by what we just talked about. But for you personally, do you think what would be better for you to spend 3 hours just focusing on one subject, trying to get very familiar, very deep in it? Or would you like to, or do you think for you personally that it might be better to do the distributed practice thing of, let's say you have 1 hour, but you divide it up by studying 3 different subjects, and then you just repeat that, maybe over 3 different days, for example. Yeah, and we'll have this as this should be a ranking question, or sorry, no, this is a who will win. Yeah,
there will be a winner.
Yeah,
so
there will be a winner to show what are the people thinking right now. Do you want to press enter to see what, because it looks like we have 16 folks who have answered that so far. Yeah,
all right, 3, 2, 1, here is the winner. Oh, wow.
Okay, nice. We've got a lot of people. Okay, they're thinking more of the distributed practice. Awesome. There is really, really, you're going to hear me say this a lot, really interesting research on, they had one group of students that studied, for 3 hours on one day, and then they were tested. And there was another group of students that they studied just for 1 hour, but spread out over 3 days. And the students who got that over 3 days, they did significantly better than the students who had all 3 hours on one day, because again, they got the benefit of, I really like this confetti effect.
I'm into it. I'm into
it. They did significantly better, exact same amount of time spent, but retention, memory, recall, retrieval, all way better on the actual test environment. You might have heard my phone alarm going off. That's just the reminder to us that we're about halfway through the session, which is great because we're about halfway through our slides. Yeah, so let's move on to the next slide and talk about interleaving, which is definitely related to cramming. So another one of those big 3 strategies that we talked about. So we discussed practice testing, we discussed distributed practice, is this technique called interleaving. There are some really good YouTube videos that explain it in more depth than we can go into here that I would definitely recommend. But really with interleaving, you're thinking about doing a variety of different subjects or different topics. So the example we kind of use is let's say you had an hour-long workout. It'd be the blocked practice or the cramming part if you focused on just one exercise the whole time. If you just spent 60 minutes doing push-ups, you're gonna, I guess you'll have great abs, maybe a strong core, but you'll be very unbalanced. You'll be kind of overly invested in just that one thing. The interleaving would be kind of almost more like circuit training, where you're doing different kind of exercises. You're exercising different parts of your body. So you're looking at kind of the whole system. And this is really more in key with how our brains can learn more efficiently. Can we go on to the next slide with those examples of what this could look like for a specific course? Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so so this is a student who's doing their anatomy course, and on the right-hand side, we have what's considered block practice, which is kind of like the opposite of interleaving. So they're only going to be doing this one, the cardiovascular system. They're going to do a big long chunk of that, and then they're going to try and master it, and then move on to the next system, which would be the digestive system, and so on and so forth. Now, in this example, on the left-hand side, we see interleaving. So this is where within that same course, they're actually splitting it up between 4 different concepts in the course. And then what they would do is they would cycle through them again and again and then again, so that they're covering each different piece for a smaller chunk, but then they're repeating it so that they're covering the same amount of time as they would if they were just doing a block practice style, except they do it in much smaller chunks. So although the net amount of time that someone would be spent studying on each of the different parts of anatomy is the same, the brain likes interleaving a little bit better. It is proven to have a lot more sort of memory retention and things like that. So and that's why we kind of recommend interleaving as a better approach to just simply sitting down with doing one concept for a long period of time.
And just to add on to that, like if we're thinking again that advice about you want the way you study and practice to match up how you're actually tested. Thomas and I were talking because we did different subjects in school, and we were thinking, have you ever had an exam that's been like really nicely organized, that's just like, here are all the questions from this unit or this unit or this unit? And I was thinking about it, and I was like, no, basically, like the tests and quizzes that I experienced and the ones that I see like a lot of other students experiencing it's usually everything kind of mixed up all together. And so you want to get familiar with that, like sort of that you want your practicing to also have that variety. And the interesting thing about that is that it is a really good benefit, again, for the improving your test taking skills, because even though we're talking about anatomy here, I'll use maybe a different example, like in a math course, like Math 1020, for example, math and art, which I took a while ago, that when you're faced with a specific problem, you have to think about what kind of problem is this? What formula do I need to apply with it? What are the different like variables that I need to think about? What kind of question actually is it? If you're doing blocked practice and you're just doing, all the questions that are like the exact same, like draw a circle ones, then you're kind of shutting off the part of your brain that is asking that vital question of what kind of question is it? And it can be very hard then when you go into a test environment where suddenly maybe you're asking yourself that question for the first time. That can be hard because that's, again, another heavy cognitive load thing. Kind of, it adds like newness or novelty to the situation, which can also increase that nervousness, that anxiety around it. So again, if you can get that practice of being able to figure out what kind of question is it when you're actually studying, that will make the test taking experience a lot better, because you're already kind of used to asking yourself those questions and wrestling with it and trying to figure out where in the course is this from? Where does this fit?
Yeah, and I think another thing too, in addition to helping with test taking strategies, as we're kind of emulating the way that things are going to be on the test, what it also does is it allows you to do your studying in smaller chunks as well. And I know we touched on that a little bit when we were talking about distributed practice. But another thing that a lot of students feel, and a lot of students say, and myself included, is, well, I only have an hour, or I only have 45 minutes until my bus comes, or something like that. And now if you're doing all your studying in block practice or cramming, that probably is true. You do only have 45 minutes. And if you're planning on studying for 3 or 4 hours or not at all, then you're not going to be very productive. But when we start doing things like interleaving or distributed practice, where we're studying in smaller chunks, then all of a sudden a 45-minute study period or waiting half an hour until our bus comes, all of a sudden can be a very productive way of covering some course content, doing some flashcards, writing some flashcards, or whatever the case may be. And kind of the phrase that always stuck out in my mind is there's no bad half hour. There's no useless 1 hour. Every amount of time, or Gretchen was telling me actually yesterday, even if it's 10, 15 minutes, that can be an incredibly productive 10-15 minutes that otherwise you would have just wasted or not used. So it's important to take that into consideration when we're thinking about the efficiency that interleaving and distributed practice allows for us.
Can we actually, I think that's a really good segue. Can we go to the next slide to talk a little
Mhm.
bit about those short amounts of time and breaks? So yeah, the example I always think of is, so I used a flashcard app when I was taking intro to Japanese. I used Anki. And well, actually I used two different ones, Anki and Quizlet. I can put, links to both of them in the chat. They're both free. Anki flashcard app. Anki is kind of requires more programming, I would say, on the user's end, but it's very customizable. Quizlet is kind of easier, more visual, like easier to pick up, but not quite as much customization available. But what I would do is I would, run through vocabulary flashcards while I was waiting for the bus and while I was on the bus. And I would just do that every day. And it's time that would have otherwise been wasted, but I was able to just take advantage of those really small pieces. When we're thinking about this like interleaving distributed practice and looking at really those spaces in between, those breaks when you're switching from one subject to the next, like we know we have really interesting research that shows our energy kind of peaks at the beginning of a study session and at the end. If you're doing just like a solid 2-hour block, then you're just getting that peak at the beginning and the end, and just one peak, or sorry, 2 peaks for the Ingham Valley. If you're doing, let's say, 45-minute sessions or half-hour sessions, you get to have like that little peak in energy every time you kind of reset and move to a new subject. Now there are pluses and minuses with that, of course, and one of them is that, and a very common thing that I think comes up when we talk to students, or when we do workshops like this, is like, okay, but like, let's say I take a break. Let's say I'm using the Pomodoro technique where I'm doing 25 minutes of focus study and then taking a 5-minute break. How do I actually get back to studying after that 5-minute break? How do I not get like unfocused and just walk away? And so that's kind of the next question that we have here on Menti for you to answer. We'd love to hear. Do you have any strategies for yourself? Like, let's say you've taken a small break after studying, but you found yourself distracted or you lost your focus. What are some things that you could do or that you have done to regain your focus? And I think this is another one of those, just open-ended questions.
Yeah.
Put my phone away, leave my phone in reach. Yes, these are so powerful. Yeah, simple but powerful. Yeah. Okay, someone's saying if they're distracted, they're gone. Okay.
Well,
Chew
hopefully
gum. Okay.
we can provide some we have some strategies that work for us
Yeah,
even
maybe
now,
these will give you some ideas.
yeah, hopefully. And
Yeah.
even now that I'm working here at the university, I take small breaks as well, and I have things that I do, and I know Gretchen does as well, to get ourselves back to work. And there's a lot of different tricks. I know if you've come to some of our other workshops, you've probably seen us mention a few. But we're totally interested to hear what have you been doing that's been working for you. I know some folks are talking about the environment and having no distractions, an extended break. Someone likes to chew gum, which
Yeah,
I
that
don't
could
know
be
if
a
I've heard
very
that one
good.
before, but I guess so, right?
That could be if chewing gum is sort of your signal to your brain that now this is when I'm back in my study time, then that's very, very powerful. Like the strategy that we were talking about, because I've definitely struggled with this. One is turning off distractions. So whether that means something like putting my phone in airplane mode, using an app like I'll put a couple into the chat. Pause or Freedom might be another one that you've heard of, but unfortunately that's a paid app. Pause at least is a free like browser add-on that you can use. What Freedom does is that it can like actually shut down or like close certain websites or apps for you for a certain amount of time. Pause, what it does is it will add a 5-minute timer. So like, let's say I really wanted to go onto Tumblr. It would say, oh, pause, like you have to wait 5 minutes. And even just having that 5 minutes can be enough to like, no, wait, I should shut it down. I really actually shouldn't open that. So those are some techniques. Other ones are, if you can think of, if you for yourself have any rituals or practices or habits that you do when you first start a study session. So I really like that someone here said get a coffee, because that's very similar to what I do. I get some tea. Thomas and I both tend to use music in different ways. So I have like study playlists, like classical playlists, like lo-fi playlists, and to use timers. So those are all things for me that this is what is going to get me into that really focused mode. So when I'm coming back from a break, I just use those strategies again, to say, okay, this is my reset. This is my cue or my signal that break time is over and I'm getting back into the studying mode. So if you don't have those kind of rituals for getting started, because getting started can often be the hardest part, it's never too late to start them. You have like a good couple of chunks of weeks, like in this last week of classes and leading up to final exams. And you can think about, if you start some good habits to sort of like have that starting ritual, you can continue them into the winter term. And then by the next round of exams, hopefully you have those habits and routines really strongly in place so that it's much easier for you to have that, okay, here's my reset button, getting back into a focused mode. Oh, I really like here. Thanks for someone who's also said they also listen to lo-fi and use timers. Yeah, they're such small things. They're so helpful.
Yeah, and I think it kind of just speaks. I think someone was talking about having a good environment and just how powerful an environment can be for getting us in the right mindset for getting our work done. An example that I'm sure many of you can relate to: when I was in school, I used to go to the Defoe Library, and I would do a lot of my studying at the Defoe Library. And I'd come in with my coffee. I'd set my books down and my laptop down in a very specific way. And once I was in that mode, my phone was off. It was in my pocket. I had a timer going. I knew how long I was going to be spending on each task, and I was really in my focus mode. Whereas if I was in an environment that maybe I wasn't so used to, I'd really need to concentrate on keeping myself on task, because, well, I'm not in my environment where I'm very productive. And now another example of that is when the COVID pandemic first hit and school became remote a couple of years ago. I was a student, and it was such a challenge to create that same productive environment in my own home. And it took me a week or two to really figure out
only a week. I struggled with longer moving from working at home.
Well, it ebbed and flowed for sure, but it took me a while to sort of figure out, where am I going to be doing my studying? What's that going to be looking like? Where I'm making coffee at home, not going to Starbucks. I'm playing the way I'm playing music is different. My desk looks different. Everything looks different. So it takes time to sort of adapt your environment. And but essentially, like Gretchen said, there's some time for you to kind of experiment a little bit, and when you've been productive, what that's felt like. Try to emulate that and keep that going as best as possible, and try to think about, that was a really good study session. I was really focused. I was able to get back on task after.
Now, how do I recreate that? What were the elements that went into making it productive?
Was it that lo-fi playlist I had going? Was it the coffee? Was it both? Was it the fact that I, in fact, put my phone on do not disturb? What was it that did it, and try to keep that going?
Yeah, let's talk about some bonus study strategies besides the big three. So, we covered those ones in more depth. We're going to go through these ones kind of more quickly now. But some of the strategies talk about using your course outline or syllabus, especially if, like me, maybe you were very good about reading your course syllabus or outline in the first week of class, or when you had something due and then never touched it again. Very human, very fair. Now is a great time to go back to it and read it thoroughly. You might find sort of like things that jump out at you that are like, oh, this makes so much more sense now that I've done the course. There was one course where I struggled with a lot of the assignments. I reread the syllabus like partway through, and I was like, this is like a magic key unlocking all this stuff. And that can be really, really helpful for exams as well. We're going to talk about like switching from focus mode to diffuse mode. We'll talk about what both those things mean and hopefully get in the importance of like breaks and doing activities that aren't just the studying, but are kind of helpful with the studying. And we're going to finish off with just kind of a checkout to talk about self-care during finals, because that is so essential and so important. Let's take a look at the syllabus course outline. So one of the things that is super helpful, which I learned about actually from a fellow advisor when she was advising, but she was also doing a master's degree. So she's back at school. She had a lot of exams. And one of her strategies that she used was turning her syllabus or course outline into a study guide for herself. Because the course outline is saying, these are all the topics that we're going to cover. If this is how it's organized, this is how it's all put together. And so you kind of don't have to reinvent the wheel and necessarily make a study guide from scratch, like, or from, your big massive notes they've been taking for the past few months. You kind of already have this built in with a course line or a study guide. One of the things that I always encourage is, if your study guide is not formatted or arranged in a way that's very easy for you to follow, then rewrite it and reorganize it, put it in your own words so that it is a helpful document for you. I really like this example from an anthropology class because to me, it makes so much sense. It's bullet pointed. You can say, okay, big topic, here are the smaller ones, here are the different, things that are there. But can we go to the next one for chemistry? This next one I would say is not as user friendly. This is so not the way my brain works, just like these long paragraphs. So below is the example of like, okay, if I was putting this into a study guide, this is how I would reorganize the information for myself. Here's how I would break it down. Here's how I would take these topics and then turn them kind of into tasks for myself, or into a study checklist to say, if I know one of the things I need to know is about the stability of, these kinds of things, then can I illustrate that, through my problem solving abilities? Like, would I be able to do a question focused on that topic? So this is like course outlines are such an underrated document that your professors do put a lot of time and thought and care a lot of the time into putting essential information out there. And it's not just for the beginning of the year that they're useful. They can be so crucial and helpful in this last week of term and as we go into final exams. So we have a question kind of related to that on Menti, which is, so if you want to rate your familiarity, let's say with your course outlines and your syllabi from, let's say 1 to 3, let's say 1, I am not familiar like at all with my course outline syllabi. 2 is kind of, I'm somewhat familiar. I kind of know them well. And 3 is, oh yeah, I'm very familiar. I could recite that in my sleep. Yeah. And you can think of sort of your outlines, as a whole, because probably you have multiple course outlines that you're thinking of. Okay. Oh, this is so interesting. We were kind of over here at like the 2.2, 2.3, and it's coming down. Now we're kind of like right in the middle. Maybe if it's multiple courses, some of them very well, other course outlines, maybe not as well. But yeah, and if you have any questions about confusing content on your course outline and syllabi, I would also say now is a great time to ask your professor while you're still in classes with them before a final exam period begins. Oh, and it's creeping down a little bit as we get more answers to 1.9. Okay, not as familiar. Yeah, now's a great time to dive back in.
Yeah, and it also gives you an opportunity to see and to reflect as well about the material that's been covered in the course. Maybe certain course material your instructor was planning on spending 2 lectures on, and they ended up spending 3 or 4 lectures on that material. So that might give you a clue. Wow, this was really, really important for our course, or maybe they combined certain sections and things like that. So you can kind of use that, as Gretchen was saying, to help inform your studying. And give you a guide for, well, did I cover the material that I need to cover for this exam, for this course?
Yeah.
So yeah, now is a great time to start to look over our course outline, course syllabus. So we haven't looked at it since September, so now is a good time to have a look at it for sure.
I like this. Now we're right again back at 2, right in the middle. This is a
It's
very
a perfect
even.
bell curve.
This is perfect. Yeah, I love this just very gentle hill. Shall we talk about focus and diffuse mode?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit earlier, we hinted at it, focus mode and diffuse mode, and studying doesn't always look the same. So we talked a little bit about the environment that we're studying in. We talked about our lo-fi music, our coffee, putting your phone away, and really getting to business. And we're going to call that our focus mode. So that's our very deliberate, very intentional form of studying, and that's kind of what we define as studying. But there's another type of studying that we're going to call diffuse mode, which looks a little bit different. And as the name implies, you're not so much intentionally doing your studying in the same way as you would be when you're really concentrating on it. You're doing other activities. So maybe you're going for a walk, going for a run. Maybe you're having a swim if you're a swimmer, or even something as simple as doodling or doing the dishes, even things that really are not inherently related to the course material, but your brain doesn't shut off as soon as you're done with your focus mode. Some of the stuff that you've been studying or thinking about or writing about is going to still be on your mind in different ways, and it can allow you to kind of continue studying in maybe informal ways that you don't necessarily think. And importantly, if you are getting frustrated, or you're stuck, or you're unable to solve a problem, for instance, sometimes going into a diffuse mode, doing something else, can allow you to get back to your material effectively. A good example of this is my partner does a lot of creative work for their job, and sometimes when they're having trouble figuring out some of their work, or it's mostly like kind of puzzles or problem solving, sometimes hanging out with her cat is gonna unlock the doors and allow her to find the answers to, or find some solutions to some of the problems that she's been working on. So that is to say, sometimes taking some breaks or time away to do something else is actually helping you when you get back to your focus mode, because maybe you have some more creative solutions as well.
The other example I love that you were talking about yesterday when you were talking with your partner talking about your partner, that really reminds you of interleaving, is that you'd say sometimes she would switch to a new pattern or a new problem, work on that, and it would almost like tickle something in her brain and be like, oh, I know how to solve that other thing now. And that's where interleaving can be so helpful, to just actually switch your mind to a completely different track, that somehow it still makes a connection. It's making these wider, broader, less obvious connections, that if you're sitting down on focusing on something, that's sort of why we have these two pictures here to sort of illustrate that focus mode and diffuse mode, that you can think of that focus mode, your attention, as sort of like a flashlight, very bright, very intense, focused on a small area, as opposed to diffuse mode, which is like softer, covering a wider area, broader, maybe giving more room for like larger, less obvious connections. Both of them are really so important and so key for, learning new information, problem solving, rehearsing information. I am a writer, and I have lost track of the number of times where I've started thinking, I have nothing to write, or I don't know how I'm going to do this. I go on a walk, and maybe I'm not even consciously concentrating on trying to solve that problem, but by the time I come back, I've come back with a new idea, or I figured out how I'm going to approach something. It is such a simple and powerful strategy. And if it's too cold to go outside for some of these, there are definitely probably some indoor diffuse mode activities that you can do. I just hear, like anecdotally stories from people, so many people who like, leap out of the shower and being like, I have this great idea, that they weren't, it's not the same as them sitting down at their desk and like, hammering away at it and constantly trying to solve it. We have another Menti question, which I really like, but I am conscious of the time. So it is 3:57 right now. Like our sort of allotted time that you signed up for is only till 4:00. We still have some content that we want to go through. So I think if you're okay with it, Thomas, we'll continue to present the content, but and we'll keep recording. But if you need to leave, if you have another commitment at 4, please feel free to, step out, do what you got to do. If you need a little break between switching from, this workshop to your next activity, please go and do that. And you can always reconnect with us if you have like any questions. If you end up watching the rest of the recording later on and want to follow up with us, please feel free to reach out, and we'll include our contact info as part of this workshop and part of the recording.
Yeah. And with that said, it looks like some folks are coming up with their favorite things to do when they're recharging. We have some folks who listen to music. We have some exercise people, some
nice running workout, playing a sport.
A sport. Well, that speaks to me. I like that. That's kind of what I did.
Thomas plays soccer, so yeah.
That's always been natural for me, for sure. So I know sometimes that, sometimes getting out for a run or playing soccer, or whatever the case may be, you come back completely rejuvenated and ready to go again. But there's a lot of things you can do. Walking your dog, right? I mean, hey, that's exercise too.
Driving, that's a great diffuse mode activity. Yeah, part of your mind is concentrating on the road, freeing up another part of your mind to just sort of kind of wander and problem solve in the back. Napping, I know there's kind of a mixed opinions about napping, but it is one of those ways of getting that rest and that recharging that you need. So I say, yeah, experiment with napping, see if it works for you or if it just makes you groggy. Sometimes, no matter how smart or effective of a study strategy you want to use, it does not matter if you're too tired to take advantage of it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of people trying out naps, see if it works with them. Yeah,
I'm a napper, I'll admit.
You nap very efficiently, so you've got a good routine down for it.
I'm an efficient napper. I almost always nap immediately after work, but I don't take like a 3-hour nap, which I know many people do. I take like a very disciplined half an hour nap just to kind of wake myself up a little bit. And now I'm not going to recommend a 3-hour nap every day. That's, I don't know the research on it, but
that might interfere with your circadian rhythms a bit, especially in winter.
Exactly, right. But napping in a way that's effective for you, that you're familiar with, can of course help you recharge. Move along here. Libraries. Yeah. Gretchen, did you want to talk about the libraries a little bit?
Yeah, so this is kind of hand in hand with talking about tutors. So we met with some very lovely librarians from the U of M libraries. The nice thing is that like the libraries do stay open during the final exam period. So you will see a lot of them like open in the next few weeks. What I always like to mention too is that it's not just the big libraries like Defoe and Science that are open. There are a lot of smaller libraries like architecture, music, St. John's or St. Paul's, where it's kind of a bit of a quieter vibe, more space. But librarians are fantastic for if you're doing maybe research and you need to get academic sources. Maybe if you are doing some take-home exams and you're not quite sure about how to set up your citations for those, if you need to have those in those sources, subject librarians can help with those as well. They have a live chat feature on their website, so you can always like talk with the librarian, and they're just like very friendly, very wonderful folks who are very, very happy to meet with students. Can we go to the next slide that has some info? Yeah. One of the things that I'll mention on just a very practical note is that they have a lot of workshops and video tutorials up on their YouTube channel, which you can see the QR code there. They have entire videos just on how to print in the library, which again I think is just so useful for everyone, because I can't count up the number of times I've printed out an essay right before it's due. And they're just like, yeah, they're full of that kind of practical advice on how to use the libraries as a physical space, as well as how to take advantage of a lot of the online resources that they have as well. And that kind of leads us to our next question, which I think you asked a version of this before, but I'd be very curious to see what it's like with this group. Where do you like to do your studying? Where do you feel you're the most effective, the most efficient? So you have the option of home, a library, a cafe, other, and you can say like, yeah, you can rank this for like home is, very non-effective for me. Too many distractions. My dog keeps, like rapping at my door. Yeah, and we'll see how this is. Oh, I like seeing these numbers change right away. There's a lot of dynamism going on here.
I also voted, even though I'm not a student anymore. The student in me voted,
Yeah,
so
yeah, very
that's part of
nice.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody likes studying in cafes anymore.
I think that's changed a lot because of the pandemic, right? We would have seen a lot higher numbers before, but now it's so much harder. Yeah. And some coffee shops are very expensive. Oh my gosh, if my study habit routine was tied to Starbucks, my wallet would be crying all the time.
Also true.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, we're seeing a lot of
Um,
libraries. Yeah. And I just want to add to that, in addition to the U of M libraries, there are also public libraries nearby. Like there's one on Pembina. There might be a public library in your area as well. And that's also just kind of nice to have a quiet, focused kind of space where you're surrounded by books. There are tables, there are outlets, there are, not going to be a lot of distractions. So that's what I would kind of suggest too. If you're not sure if you live near a Winnipeg Public Library, they have maps and that information online.
yeah, so it looks like libraries, wherever you find your
Strong
library.
contender.
Yeah, looks like
Library.
it's our number one winner. I think that's the thing that we think of when we think of studying, right? We think of the
Mhm.
library, and it's tried and true, and probably for good reason. And but I do see that home is in second place, and I think that a lot of folks here, and myself included, have spent a decent number of years and time doing studying, or Gretchen, in our case, working from home as well, and getting used to making home an environment that can be studyable or workable as well. So let's move along here, and this is a part of the workshop that I really like. We've talked a lot about some of the strategies that have worked for us, but we want to give the floor to everyone here right now. Do you have any advice that you'd like to give fellow students about preparing for exams? So some things that have been working for you, or a strategy you're going to employ the next couple weeks? If so, what is it?
Oh, I love that note. Don't be too hard on yourself. Yes, that is so important. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah, so it's something that we have not as a formal Menti question, but just a question I want to throw out more for you guys to ponder. And maybe it'll come up a lot. I think it might be coming up like in these suggestions as well, is what is maybe just one thing that you're going to do for self-care in this last week of class and as you go into the exam periods. So I think actually all of these answers, don't be too hard on yourself, get enough sleep, start now. Don't worry, it's not too late. Absolutely. Don't overwork yourself. If you've reached your max limit for the day, end your study session in tomorrow. I think they're also fantastic answers to that question. I really like this. It's okay to miss out on studying with your friends. If you study better without them, you can always see them in the future. Yes, that's so wise. Studying with friends was for me always kind of a mixed bag. I am an extrovert. I do get energized by other people, but I get very easily distracted by talking about things that aren't school related. So it's nice to have that. Okay, I can tolerate the discomfort of studying alone for now if it's more efficient. I can have this reward of hanging out with my friends after I've done what I need to do. I really love that. Thank you for sharing. One thing I'm going to put into the chat as well is if you want to talk to an academic advisor in the first year center, like me or Thomas, whether it's about stuff like deferrals, exams, prepping for exams, course changes, you just put our contact info in there. We are in 205 tier in the first year center. There's our phone number, our email. If you want to talk with either me or Thomas specifically, you can request to speak with us. We're always happy to meet with students on drop-in who are like, hey, I saw your workshop. So yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out. Oh, I really like this. Again, very practical strategy as well. Get noise canceling head or earphones for noisy environments. Absolutely. That's a great one. Yeah. Yeah. Any other strategies, anything that, we didn't talk about that you find works well for you that you think might be helpful for others to know while they're prepping for exams? We'll give it another couple minutes for folks to answer.
Yeah, I would hate to cut someone off if they're just busy typing away. And just kind of to speak about this one here in the middle. Back when I was in school, one thing that was really nice is after a long day of studying, maybe I'd been in the Defoe library since 9 or 10 in the morning. Sometimes me and my friends would meet up and play pool in IQs at the end of the day. It was a nice way to kind of wrap up on the, we knew that we were at the max limit for the day. We knew there's no more productivity that's going to happen. We're kind of all tapped out. It's time to do some kind of diffuse mode activity or something fun and hang out with your friends. And as we're all coming from different necks of the U of M and connecting again, because sometimes that can make it all a little bit more worthwhile.
Yeah, and I love, again, I want to touch on that, the not overworking yourself, sort of recognizing when you've reached your max limit for the day, because kind of like with the cramming, like you can push yourself, but at what cost, right? Is that just going to steal your energy and your focus from the next day? The goal, I think, with the exam is it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You want to sustain yourself throughout that time, not just because on the practical sense that like you want to perform well for exams, but just also in the way that, your health is important, your well-being is important. Like, to me, even more important than your productivity or your performance. If someone asks me, I've gotten this question a lot, should I stay up later studying or should I get some sleep? My answer is always going to be just get some sleep. Altogether, the benefits are going to be so much greater in the short term and the long term if you just actually recognize what you need and give yourself what you need, which is usually rest.
Yeah. So we'll move along here. Thanks for giving some advice. I think these are all really awesome. So I appreciate everyone who had a chance to type out some responses for us. And I just wanted to mention one other thing. So like I said earlier, this is the final workshop that we're doing for the fall term. All of the other workshops that you see here, so those were workshops that we did earlier in the term and we recorded them. And they're available on the Academic Learning Center website under Academic Success Workshops. You can also find that by clicking on the QR code, or I guess scanning the QR code on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you're kind of forgetting where you registered for this workshop, where you found them, it's going to be on the Academic Learning Center website. And if there's maybe something about preventing procrastination, maybe you were at that workshop, or maybe that's a topic that you feel would be helpful to do a workshop on, you can watch those recordings as well. So
and we'll also do them next term in the winter term as well. So if you want to come to more one of these, I still think a lot of these are really good just as a refresher for going into the exam period. I've had a lot of students I've talked to in the past couple of weeks who are like, I think I really need to create a study schedule for the exam period. That one is a great one to watch. I think the preventing procrastination one, you could watch at any time of the year and it would be helpful. Preparing for midterms, kind of similar to some of the topics we talked about here about preparing for finals. And the others are more helpful if you're focusing on academic writing. Maybe again, you're doing like take home essay exams or things like that. But yeah, there's lots of good content there. And I think
my favorite one to give is preventing procrastination.
Procrastination. It's so relatable. Anyone can find something helpful in that one.
I think it's a workshop for both the audience and the facilitators as well. I think it's one of those ones that just kind of brings everyone on the same page and everyone together. So with that said, we'll move along here. We have a survey up, and essentially what we would like, if you can and if you're able, you can go on the QR code that you see on your screen or by clicking the link below, and give us some feedback about this workshop. We make these workshops for students. We try to touch on topics and research that's most applicable to first year students. So If you can give us some feedback about how you felt about this workshop, what you found helpful, and other pointers you might have for us, that would be awesome.
Yes, we
I'll
do
leave.
read all the feedback. We take it very seriously. We incorporate it into the next round of workshops that we do. So for us too, this is always a continual process of like learning, trying to improve so that we can make these workshops as useful as possible and actually providing what people are asking for and identifying as a need.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll be reading
yeah.
these. I'll be reading these tomorrow, and
We'll be reading them and chatting about them. Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and like we mentioned, we're doing a similar workshop series in the winter. We want to make sure that our workshops are always up to date and always helpful for students. So this feedback is super helpful for us. If you can just take a minute to fill this out, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, doesn't need to be long answers, nothing like that. This is not an exam.
Yeah.
Yeah, just can be as short as you want.
Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
the easy part. Oh, and I guess this kind of brings us pretty much to the end of our workshop. Gretchen, did you want to close off
Yeah,
the recording, and then
sure.
we'll get to more of a Q&A period